Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 9 of the Podcasters of Horror, a podcast from the Super Network at supermarcey.com. I am your host, of course, Super Marcey, and with me, as always, is my trusty co-host, the one who is terrible, the Bede, Jermaine. Hello, Bede, how's it going?
I'm good, thanks, Super Marcey. I think I should go by Super Marcey now so we can say Super Marcey so much in the span of 30 seconds. But that's just me. But I'm pretty good, thanks. Been pretty busy as of late because of still in slight lockdown mode, but restrictions have gone down a bit since we last podcast, which not too much, but at least enough that we could actually see people now, which is great.
Yeah, if you live alone, you're allowed to have a bubble buddy.
Exactly. Or you can actually be somebody's bubble buddy, even if you live with some other people, which is good, also good as well. So
yeah, which is always good. So, and we get an extra hour of exercise out the house.
Exactly.
And curfew is an hour later, so.
Or at least for just another week or so. So I guess depending on how the numbers go over the next week. But it seems like we're at least getting there because it seems like the Victorian government seems to be really happy with how things are going so far, which is great.
Considering how low the cases are, the spread's definitely slowed down a lot. So hopefully for us it slows right down, and I really hope it slows down worldwide because it is horrible to see. I guess the devastation that something you wouldn't have expected has done. So our thoughts are with everybody who's affected right now.
Agreed. Like there's so many people that all around the world, and even people we know personally who are definitely going through a lot right now. But we are definitely there for them and to help them out in their time of need if need to be, and also just to always just be there for each other. You know, that's I guess that's the only thing we can do until this virus sorts itself out, whether it's through vaccine or through other means, is just to, you know, be kind, be helpful, and just be there for everyone who needs help.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, if you need someone to talk to, you can always chat to us. Our friends can hit us up. You can you know, check out some of the stuff we do. It's a good distraction, and you know, you've got lots of free numbers and things available. So yeah.
Exactly.
With all that said, let's talk about horror.
Exactly, because we already live enough horror in the world as it is right now. Let's just talk about, but somehow we still escape into it by talking about the horror genre. But this is, of course, Podcasters of Horror, where we're at least for dissecting the 2-season run of Masters of Horror, and we've been doing that for a couple of episodes now. And Marcy, which 2 episodes from season 2 are we talking about for this one?
Yes, so if anyone listened to the last couple of episodes, we have hit season 2, and we will still be continuing this podcast once we finish season 2, so stay tuned to hear about that when we get there. But this episode we are on episode 4 and 5. So episode 4 is Sounds Like, and episode 5 is Pro-Life. So we'll get on to number 4 of season 2, Sounds Like.
Hello, Malleus Software.
2,655 times a day, I'm listening to other people.
I can't see into my cubicle. My fingers tapping the keys on my cell. He heard me.
Make it stop!
Still.
This was directed by Brad Anderson, who you may know as the director of Session 9 and The Machinist. Probably his 2 better known films. The short story was by Mike Driscoll, and teleplay by Brad Anderson. And this one aired in November 2006. And the basic plot synopsis, which I'm using Wikipedia. The story of Larry Pierce, an ordinary man blessed with the gift/curse of the extraordinary hearing that drives him to the brink of insanity and forces him to take violent action to silence the horrific cacophony in his head. If that is pronounced wrong, I apologize.
Yeah, I had to look that up to find out, and I completely forgot how to say it.
Yeah, this one stars Chris Bauer and Alora Margolis. And if you watch a bit of TV, you'll probably know Chris Bauer from The Wire and True Blood. Both very different performances. And again, in this one, a very different performance.
Indeed. And I think for me, like, at least for the whole episode of Sounds Like I think when I first watched Masters of Horror the first time, through both the first season and as well up till this point in season 2, I really loved the series, but I wouldn't say there was an episode, even though there were quite a number that I absolutely loved, that I felt was perfect to me at the time. And then with Sounds Like, which even though I'd already seen a couple of Brad Anderson's films prior to this one, like Session 9 and The Machinist, which are great movies, definitely highly recommend everyone to check out if you haven't seen those. So I knew kind of what to expect from him as a filmmaker, because he is a man that, when it comes to other horror directors, he's one who definitely loves to tackle psychological horror.
Yeah, he's very much that kind of slow burn psychological type of person. And I think, that's what makes, those movies, as we mentioned, Session 9 and The Machinist, like, very memorable, and how they actually get to you so much. And even though, he's not working with the same amount of time, this is obviously a short movie, which goes for an hour, but he still managed to have it be a slow burn, a very psychological piece, and it really gets under your skin, much like those films did. So for me, actually, I had seen this one previously, and I do remember really liking it and it being quite memorable. So it was actually really good to revisit this one, and it's just a reminder that, like, early to mid 2000s Brad Anderson was the shit, bro.
Oh yeah, like what I was about to say as well was, like, before this episode aired, I remembered it got a bit of a mixed reaction from audiences and critics, mainly due that it was a very sort of slow moving episode, and some felt like not much happened. So on that, I didn't really have that high of expectations, but I have to admit, at least the first time I watched it, I was actually blown away by it, and I found it, and I loved every single aspect of it, and I would even say that out of the entire 2 seasons of the show, this was my absolute favorite episode, and the one that I would actually consider a perfect episode. Like, I had no problems with it at all. Now, having rewatched it again with you in prep for this episode, I got to say, I still feel that way. There's nothing about this short film that I have any problems with. I feel like what Brad Anderson achieves with this short works brilliantly. Like, every aspect, from the way how it's structured, where it goes with its story, and also how he handles the psychological horror, and also Chris Bauer's performance. Like, everything is just pitch perfect, and I think I would say is actually a brilliant episode of the show.
Yeah, so obviously, I assume people have listened to our previous podcasters' episodes. I've said, and I don't think that would change, is that my favorite episode is Cigarette Burns. And while that is still my absolute favorite, this one's definitely one of the ones I think is right up there as being the best. And yeah, like, it's hard to remember exactly how I felt when I did see it, but I know I really, really liked it, and it was one that still stayed with me. But upon rewatch, I think I appreciated it and liked it more. And I think that's probably because, as we mentioned when we rewatched it, is the sound design in it is
Oh, yeah.
so insanely good. It gets really under your skin. You really do feel what the main character of Larry feels because you're hearing it, and you're hearing it very like loud, but it's just I don't know. I don't know if they kind of edit it to just really pierce your ears and just make you feel uncomfortable, but that's how I felt. And you understand like that's how the character feels. So it really puts you in his ears.
Yeah, or even just into his psychological state, because like at the very beginning we sort of see him at, because he works for I believe a telecommunications company, so he's overhearing a lot of phone call for telemarketers and people I guess it is an IT company actually.
I think
now
it
that I
must
think so.
be I think it must be like a helpline for
Yeah.
IT or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so he overhears like all these calls because he monitors them and everything. But even then, people like his co-workers kind of see he has some kind of almost an abnormal sense of hearing. Like you can be on the other side of the room and he can hear you like as plain as day, as if you were next to him. You were next to him.
Yeah, it's kind of like, Superman's intense hearing.
Yeah, and at the beginning it's sort of like it's sort of stable, like things are louder, but he's in a good state of mind. But as the episode progresses, and the thing is, like, what also affects him is the death of his son, which happens prior to the events of this story.
Yeah.
And he's a man who is still dealing with grief, and it's how, in a way, compared to his wife, played by Laura Margolis, who, even though she's definitely got her own problems, as we sort of noticed it during the episode, but you can tell that at least she is trying to make the attempt to move on with her life.
And you get the idea that he hasn't and he can't, in a way.
Yeah,
and yeah, that's what kind of he sort of, once that happens, and it's like something he felt like maybe he could have stopped if he had heard like his son's heart more. I don't know, but it does affect him to the point where it feels like he's almost like hallucinating things, and you kind of see that in a scene that makes a co-worker very uncomfortable.
Yeah, the thing is with this in the story that his son was sick, and then how he found out is that he sort of can hear his son's heart beating irregularly. Yeah. And then of course when he and his wife see the doctors, they said that he's too young to have a heart transplant and there's nothing they can do to save him. And in a way, it's almost like a mixture of grief but also guilt that is unable to do anything for his son, and why it's kind of, and also seeing that his wife is wanting to move on. He also has this kind of anger towards her as well. And I feel like the mixture of this guilt, grief, and also anger starts to consume him. And as it does, his hearing becomes more heightened. So any sound sounds far more worse than it actually is. Like certain sounds, like even like rubbing your fingers together, sounds like nails on a chalkboard to him. Like, which I think is actually really great. In terms of like how to, again, like you said, put us into the mindset of what he's going through, but also kind of have almost something abnormal about these sounds, because as you sort of hear the sounds from these specific things, like I said, whether it be scratches or a fly buzzing around, there's something almost alien to these noises that feels unnatural, that these kind of sounds are coming from them.
Yeah, definitely. And look, being that I have very sensitive ears, like certain sounds feel very heightened to me. So in a way I could relate to that. Like if someone's tapping on something from across the room, I can hear it. But if you're talking to me, and you're sitting next to me talking to me, I can hear that, tapping sound or dripping tap better than what I can hear you, for example. So yeah, this one hits a bit close to home with what he experiences, and just with my obviously own dealing with the way my hearing is. Although I haven't gone mad by it or anything.
At least not yet, anyway.
Not yet. But yeah, it's that whole sound is just done so well, and I like that it is like this metaphor around the grief, and as it kind of gets worse or he's dealing with it more, is when the sounds get very, horrific for him. And I think it does show that he hasn't really processed it, and he doesn't. I guess he can't quite move on, whereas his wife has kind of more accepted it, and she wants to have and get pregnant, and he is very much against it, and you can see why they're at completely different places with their grieving and their processing of the situation, which obviously makes for a bit of a horrific, I guess, third act of this film.
Indeed, and you can tell, like, because all the people where he works with kind of see that, there's something wrong with Larry, and they do try to give him help, but he's very resistant, or at least to that help. And I think, like, sort of like pushing people aside, it really sort of, like, his mindset just disintegrates even more so. And where it goes to its third act, which seeing that this is a spoiler show, where he actually does indeed murder his wife. Now, you just don't know where, because he's with the sounds getting more and more heightened as it goes along. Even his wife's breathing almost kind of feels like his head's about to explode. And the only thing he can do is he smothers her.
Yeah, he smothers her because he wants those sounds to stop. And the sounds kind of do go back to normal for a brief period of time for him.
Mm-hmm.
But then, things start to unravel with, the wife wanting to have another baby and stuff like that. So it goes from, that peaceful, bit that he's at, and then it just goes back around and it starts getting even worse than it was before. And I guess in his mind, it was like he has to get rid of what's doing it, but it still doesn't stop. And that leads him to cutting his ears off.
Exactly. Which I think you and I kind of said this when we were watching. It's like, I don't think that's how it's supposed to work. Because, I mean, yeah, you can cut your ears off, but you're still going to hear stuff. If anything, you'd have to, burst out your eardrums if you didn't want to hear anything anymore.
I mean, it makes for a great visual at the end because he's gripping the boat that he used to sail with his son. So yeah, you can tell it's all with that, and I think it's a really good story, and I think for the way it works in this, it's actually structured really, really well. And something like this, I think, could have easily been turned into a full-length film because there is enough there to add more, and it would still be just as compelling, and it will still get under your skin like that, especially if Brad Anderson was doing it. So I think, as we do discuss, like, this one would work as a full-length film, in my opinion, at least.
Definitely. Like, I mean, if you had seen Session 9 and The Machinist, you could definitely tell that with those films that Brad Anderson knows how to keep the psychological horror building throughout like a 90-minute runtime. And I can see him do that for this episode if he decided to extend it. But I can also see why some people would have a problem with the episode, because compared to sort of the other episodes of Masters of Horror that we have discussed in the past, it definitely is a slow burn one. But for me, I love horror films that take that kind of slow burn approach because to me, it sort of sucks me in more as a viewer. And being that this is kind of more of a character study as well, that sort of equally just sucks me even more into the story, because those are the two kind of aspects I'd love to watch in a horror film, whether it be a slow burn or a character study. So the combination of both those in this one film definitely just hooked me right at the very beginning to the end.
Yeah, and obviously with you, I do like slow burn, and I do like character studies, and blah, blah, what was I trying to say? Character studies and psychological film, psychological horror. So yeah, this of course suits me, and I guess like I can see why if people aren't into, those kinds of horror, I can see why they might not have liked it. But if you are into, more of a psychological horror and stuff that actually takes its time to build, like this is definitely worth watching. But yeah, again, like because I think it's so good, it's hard for me to be like, how can someone not like it? But again, it's not for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, even like some of Brad Anderson's films are definitely like he knows what type of films that interest him. And he has quite a varied career if you look at all of his film work. And these days he's also worked on a lot of TV as well. But if you look at just his film work alone, he's someone who, like, he can make something like, something as a slow burn like Session 9, but also immediately make something that is non-stop, fast-paced and intense, like The Call, starring Halle Berry. So, like, he knows how to build tension, whether it be a slow burn or a fast burn. And for me, you can definitely, this for me, it was like the perfect kind of fit between filmmaker and material.
Absolutely. And yeah, I should mention one of his other films, Trans-Siberian, which is something I really, really like, is also something I'd highly recommend as well. Something a bit different, but it's I think it's really good. But yeah, we both obviously loved this episode and highly recommend it. So what would your rating out of 5 be for this one?
You know what, Marcy? I gave this episode the same rating as I did back in 2006, and I'm gonna give that same rating again. I'm giving it 5 stars, which is the most I've given to a single episode of Masters of Horror.
For me it's 4.5 out of 5, so definitely one of the high ratings I've given to an episode. Yeah, I think it's a fantastic one, and I would highly recommend it. And if you have sensitive ears, be warned, because it will freak you out like it did me.
Exactly.
Yes. On to the next episode, episode 5 of season 2, is Pro-Life.
This girl was raped, and she's had a dissociative break with reality. She's determined she wants us to terminate the pregnancy.
The only thing you can do to ensure my daughter's well-being is to let her out of that damn slaughterhouse.
I can feel it moving.
An active baby is a healthy baby.
Whatever's inside of me, it's evil.
Something's wrong.
What's happening?
It's here!
Protect the baby.
Directed by John Carpenter, written by Drew McWeeny and Rebecca Swan, who also wrote my favorite, Cigarette Burns. And this one is Pro-Life tells the story of a young pregnant girl trapped inside an abortion clinic by her murderous family, who soon discovers the only thing more dangerous than her pursuers is the demonic secret that she carries within her. It stars Caitlin Wachs, Ron Perlman, Emmanuelle Vaugier, Mark Feuerstein, and Bill Doe. And if I butchered those names, I apologize.
Indeed.
And Derek Mears appears as well.
Exactly.
So yeah, another John Carpenter episode written by the dream team from Cigarette Burns, and they wrote this one specifically for John Carpenter. So how does this one stack up? For me, it doesn't really touch Cigarette Burns. It still has, I guess, interesting ideas present that, you're in an abortion clinic where you have someone who's pregnant, and You have the sort of overly religious family on one side, and the people that are there just doing their job on the other side, and you feel like it has something to say, but it is a bit confusing in a way in that regard. So it's obviously taking on very social topics, because obviously the topic of abortion is very, what's the right word, controversial, which it shouldn't be, but everybody has their own, thinkings or beliefs or whichever, and some people go to weird lengths about it, that this clinic is gated off, which, I haven't been and seen an abortion clinic or anything of the sort in the US, so I don't know what they're like, but in that way it's a bit eye-opening. But yeah, it's I guess I want to say it's okay. I think it's more of a mixed bag, and I think it's because the message just is weird. Like, you don't know, are you supporting pro-life? Are you supporting pro-choice? I don't know. It's very hard to distinguish, but I think when it adds more of the, I guess, demonic type elements, it still doesn't really help with that. Bede?
Yeah.
To say on this one.
Well, I think when the first time I watched this episode, I will say this, like, before I did watch it, I was very excited. Like you said, it's John Carpenter coming back to direct another episode, and Cigarette Burns was such an awesome episode, and having Drew McWeeny and Rebecca Swan come back to write another episode for Carpenter, that just, I was like, you know what, I don't need anything else, I am down. But then when I sort of read the synopsis, I thought, okay, this actually sounds like it could be a great episode. Like, it's dealing with a very sort of provocative and controversial topic that even like 14 years after this episode aired, like, it's still very much a major discussion in the political landscape. And I thought, okay, like, I could definitely see that. Like, I mean, in terms of having the story set around abortion, and like that has a lot of potential, like, to be a really interesting, thought-provoking, and scary episode. When I watched the episode, I got to admit, I was very underwhelmed, and now, sort of 14 years later, I still feel kind of the same way. Like, I agree with you, it is just a merely okay episode, but I feel like as you said, it's very confused on what it wants to say. It's very.
Sorry.
I guess for me, at the time, I felt like it didn't really have anything to say about the topic of abortion, whether it's if it's pro-abortion or anti-abortion. I guess that they were like Drew McWeeny and Rebecca Swan were kind of trying to take a mutual kind of ground to it, which I do commend them for, because this is a topic that is very complex but I think for me, they were kind of more interested in having the story set around an abortion clinic rather than actually discuss the topic of abortion.
Yeah,
if that makes any sense.
I kind of think like maybe you can see which way it leans, because Ron Perlman's character, the father, realizes that God's not speaking to him. It was actually a demon. And that was something that was obviously lying to him.
Yeah.
And that this, that maybe people that are overly religious about these things should be more careful about that.
Yeah.
Because not everything is what it seems, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And
I think maybe I'm reading too much into it. Like, maybe that's a bit of the message. I don't know. But, in this case, it was a demon baby.
And I think that's kind of the interesting thing.
Is that okay to
yeah.
abort? I don't know. That's so, like, feral, but okay.
Yeah, well, like for the sort of like, because with religion in our real world, there's always a hot debate whether God is real or not. But it's definitely like in the terms of what's happening in the world of this story that not only is God real, but also demons are very much real. And what this young girl, Angelique, played by Caitlin Wachs, does have a demon baby inside her. So I guess having that kind of real supernatural aspect to it in the story does sort of complicate some of the messaging of the story. And like you said, like I honestly do believe, like at the end of the day, all the filmmakers involved are definitely pro-choice. I think there's no debate about that.
Yeah, I do find it kind of interesting though, like how the dad thinks he's hearing from God, but is really the demon. But then Angelique must have heard God because she ends the episode by saying God's will is done after she killed the demon baby.
Indeed. So in the end, it's like between her and her dad, she was the one who's kind of more in tune with God than he was. And
maybe the movie was saying, well, God thinks it's okay
to abort a demon baby.
to abort a demon baby. But maybe their message was that maybe God would be okay with the choices you make in life.
Yeah, and I think also,
unless you're a crazy like serial killer, I don't think God would approve of that.
Yeah, exactly. I think well, that's the thing though, because I do commend the episode for a lot of reasons. Like I said, there are some definitely themes about it that are interesting, and it does at least explore it well enough. Like it does show, like, Ron Perlman's characters, like he is definitely a very right-wing extremist fundamentalist Christian who definitely like, even though doesn't delve into as much, but I wouldn't be surprised if what he believes in kind of lines in more with something like with some of the more sort of like more extremist Christian groups in the US, like I keep forgetting them.
Westboro Baptist Church.
Yeah, exactly, like them. Yeah. That's the name I was thinking of. So to me, it's like so when they sort of explore that, like it does feel very heavy-handed and almost kind of stereotypical of what we think of those type of people are. But as we both know, like having seen in documentaries and whatnot, like that is what those people are like. So I guess in a way, it's almost kind of just showing it in an accurate way with how those kind of the people are. But like you said, I think the interesting thing is that, like you said, like the whole story, like Ron Perlman's character believes all the voices that are talking to him to protect the baby and all that, he believes is from God. But the moment when he finds out that it was indeed a demon that was talking to him, it's the scene where that revelation hits him like a ton of bricks. You can definitely see that character just like, what have I done? Like, his whole world has been crushed. And it's also a very kind of a profound kind of moment in a way, because it kind of makes you sort of question a lot of things. Like, I guess, let's say for the sake of an argument, like say if God and the devil are 100% real. Like, how do we know if the things that, some far right Christian groups are saying, like, oh, God told me to do this, but how do you know that is God talking to you? What if it is in fact the devil or a demon? And I think that's an interesting topic to discuss, and you could easily build a whole story around that.
Yeah, see, I think this has like really good ideas like that, and sort of, how it's kind of reversed, where the father who thinks he's hearing from God, where it's the demon, but then the daughter actually hears from God by what she actually does with the demon baby. And ideas like that, and obviously what the message is, kind of gets very mixed up in all of this. But like I said, I can assume certain things. And as we've discussed it more, sort of my brain's been like, thinking maybe too much. I don't know, or reading too much into it. But yeah, I think maybe the execution of it didn't work entirely for me, but it's still, solid in its own ways. I just don't know if John Carpenter was as, I guess, into doing this one as he was Cigarette Burns. I'm not sure, but one of the really good aspects of this one is the score from Cody Carpenter, who is John Carpenter's son.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It's a really good, memorable score, and it does suit it, and it's just definitely one of the big highlights of the film. The actual demon design is actually really well done. I quite liked that. As far as performances go, I think they're all kind of a bit mixed. I mean, you can't go wrong with Ron Perlman, even if he's bad.
Yeah.
So he's always enjoyable, but I think the performances are kind of up and down.
Yeah.
I think it could have been better, and I think some of the themes could have been sort of fleshed out a little bit more.
I agree, and
yeah,
I think it is, like you say, it's a mixed bag, and not just the performances, but even just how, from a filmmaking standpoint, it is. And I said this to you while we were watching it, that it felt, at least compared to his work on Cigarette Burns, it just didn't seem like Carpenter was as interested in this story as he was in Cigarette Burns. And I think the main reason why that is, and this is kind of my theory I've come up with, is that I feel like compared to Cigarette Burns, which Drew McWeeny and Rebecca Swan kind of wrote, didn't know who was going to direct it. But with this one, though, like they know that they were going to team up with Carpenter again. So they almost felt like, oh, let's write a total John Carpenter script. And maybe in a way, he kind of felt like, really? Do I have to like tread over some of the familiar tropes I've done before in the past? Like, because like this episode in particular pretty much is assault on Precinct 13 in an abortion clinic and with a demon. And also a little bit of the Thing in there as well, because the demon baby, when you actually see it, kind of looks like the spider creature from the Thing, you know, where the legs spout out from one of the guy's heads. Like, there's definitely kind of a lot of homages to Carpenter's previous work. But I guess for me, he just seems like he kind of phoned it in a bit. I think he was more invested for the first half, where it was just basically like the characters in conversation and having that sort of standoff with Ron Perlman's character just through the gates and what's going to happen. Because that section of the first half is actually quite intense because you're not sure exactly where it's going to go. When shit hits the fan and the siege begins, it just almost seems like he kind of lost a bit of interest after that. Even like some of the action set pieces that follow on from there, they just kind of seem, pretty meh compared to what he's done in the past.
Yeah, it's it does feel a little bit like John Carpenter in certain ways. Obviously not quite the heights of some of the stuff he's done, but I still think it's fairly solid and watchable. It just, I don't know, I think maybe perhaps with the script it wasn't as
fleshed out.
Those themes weren't as fleshed out, or maybe not as apparent, and I think for something like this they maybe should have been a bit more, I don't know.
But I think I will, even though as muddled and as mixed as the messages of this episode is. But what didn't occur to me until this recent watching is I think I discovered like what the real message of this whole episode is. And I don't know whether this is intentional or not, or maybe again, maybe I'm just looking in too much into this as well, is that the real message of this whole episode is that men need to actually listen to what women are saying.
Yeah, so pretty much the men are the ones that get hurt in this movie, and the women are basically saying what's what, and no one wants to listen. Like with Angelique, she's like, no, I need to do this, and then the male is like, well, I don't know yet, and she's like, no, I'm telling you. And someone else is like, you can't speak to her that way, and da. So it's like, this is saying, men, listen to women, otherwise the demon will kill you.
Exactly, because when you
that's what it was trying to say the whole time. Just
and all the signs are definitely there to kind of prove that theory, because you got Angelique knows that this is a demon baby, but her dad is 100% convinced that God, from what God is telling him from his point of view, is that that baby needs to be protected. So instead of listening to his daughter and believing that it's not actually a child from God, it's a demon baby, he pretty much, like, all this stuff happens. You know, he didn't listen to his daughter. He listened to a voice that, you know, he thinks was God when in fact it wasn't. But and then once Angelique gets to the clinic, one of the male doctors there is like saying, oh, well, we can't do the operation. And she, like you say, is trying to tell him, I know what this is. You need to get it out of me now. And of course, the doctor kind of makes the assumption like, oh, she's just like had a traumatic experience. But it's possible that maybe her dad or someone in her family might have raped her and she's trying to block it out. So they're not actually listening to her. And of course, you got another young girl who's there with her parents. The arsehole dad is like completely mean to her. And it's like, oh, we wouldn't be here if this wasn't if it wasn't because of you and stuff like that. So it is at the end of the day, and then, you know, he gets killed too. So at the end of the day, it pretty much is, if there's any message I take from this whole episode, is that men listen to women.
Yeah.
They know what's right. And if a woman tells you there's a demon baby inside it, you better fucking believe there's a demon baby inside her. And of course, if Ben just listened, then none of this shit would have happened.
Exactly. They wouldn't have had the demon show up in the first place.
Exactly.
And they would have seen it was a demon baby.
Exactly. And then, you know, innocent people wouldn't have died. And then Ron Perlman would have horribly, basically did an attempted abortion on that doctor who owns the clinic. And it was like you don't see anything, but it's such what it makes you leave up to your imagination is just more horrifying, because it's like, because he's got all the tools and he's like, so we're basically, you like in Ron Perlman's mind, oh, you like aborting babies? Let's use those same practices on you and see how you like it.
So he either cut off his dick or his balls or both, basically.
And then drained him out as well with a sucking thing. And I'm just like, yeah, they don't show that. Thank goodness. So it's like, what? Yeah, it's still a very cringy moment and a bit over the top, but it's definitely a memorable moment for sure.
Yeah. You just know it's leading to it and you're just like, ugh. But yeah. So what would you give this one out of 5?
Well, I think overall, like I said, it is a mixed bag. It is a watchable episode, and I will give it credit for that. And it is reasonably enjoyable. Like I wasn't bored at all throughout this whole episode, and I was in some ways entertained because, you know, it's Carpenter doing a Siege movie, so, you know, regardless, even if he was phoning it in a little bit, you still get some fun stuff there. And like I said, there are some interesting aspects in it that make it quite memorable. But I feel like, yeah, it's sort of a mixed bag in terms of how it feels like, as we discussed, it's kind of confused about what it wants to say. And maybe what it wants to say is, it fails in what it thinks it wants to say, but I guess in other ways it succeeds, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag overall. So I think I give it about a solid 3, if I would say so.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I'm giving it 3 out of 5. It is a mixed bag, but I think there are some things that kind of bring it up from, say, a 2.5.
Yeah.
The score and just, yeah, some of the other bits and pieces. Like I said, there's good visuals in it. There is, you know, it's an abortion clinic, but yeah, there are sort of fun-ish parts. It's hard to say that that's fun, but you know what I mean? But yeah, like, it is watchable. Not the best episode, but not the worst episode.
Indeed. And also Ron Perlman, who we are name dropping at the moment. We have met in real life, just saying.
Yes, we have met Ron Perlman, and we've also met Emmanuelle Vaugier.
Now, I sort of, in hindsight, wish we should have talked to them about this episode of the show. If we were doing this podcast back then, we were like, let's totally interview them about this episode.
Totally. But yes, we have met 2 people from this episode, so how cool is that?
Exactly.
And yeah, that is a wrap on this episode of Podcasters of Horror. I'd like to thank me and Bede for being your hosts and having this interesting discussion. As mentioned before, you can find us on the Super Network at supermarcey.com. You can follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/SM_supernetwork. You can follow my Twitter account at twitter.com/supermarcey. You can join the Super Network Facebook page at facebook.com/the-super-network. You can also go into Facebook and look up the Super Network group, which you can join and chat with us and share memes and whatnot. You can send email or hate mail addressed to Bede at thesupernetworksm@gmail.com, and you can subscribe to us at Patreon at patreon.com/thesupernetwork. And we have lots of awesome goodies there for just as little as $2. So please join us on there. And you can subscribe to the podcast at Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Castbox, and Spotify. And Bede, where can people find you aside from all those locations?
Indeed. If people want to find me, they can find me at my Twitter page at twitter.com/bjamine, or my personal writers page at facebook.com/terribleaussie. And of course, you can find all my writings at supermarcey.com with reviews and columns. My latest one for Bad Movie Tweetathon, which I did on Jonah Hex, is currently up online as we speak, and as well as the poll for the latest one, which I hopefully will do next week. And also keep a lookout during the next few weeks, because I'm going to get back into writing mode and attempt to write a couple of awesome columns throughout October in honor of the Halloween season. And what I can say is that I am actually in one of them, which I believe may be a 2-parter, is going to be my countdown of the 100 best horror films of the 2010s.
Interesting.
And also check out my column, Horror Down Under, over at thescreencast.com as well.
Yes, and keep a lookout, because October is around the corner and we will be doing our 31 Days of Horror, and I will be doing mini reviews for all the films that I will be watching, and Bede will probably be doing mini Twitter reviews as well, so keep an eye out for those.
Indeed, and I think both our lists will be online next week, or at least mine will be. I don't know about yours.
Mine will already be up by the time this goes live.
Oh, awesome. So mine will be at least just after this episode airs. So keep a look at both, and we'll see how we go, because we'll definitely have a lot of interesting, cool movies to watch throughout the month.
Yes, and hopefully our lists give people some ideas, or, whichever new things to watch. And yeah, with that, we'll bid you farewell. Stay safe. Much love, and catch you later.
See you, everyone.